Hi, my name is Joey Brown and I'm a Senior Product Manager at SolarWinds. In this video, I'm going to show you how dynamic forms work inside of the SolarWinds Service Desk and how they can help you streamline the workflow for you and your end users. I'll walk you through how to create custom forms and custom fields and outline certain use cases to help demonstrate how helpful this functionality can be. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. We're going to be mostly playing in setup in the beginning, and then we'll hop over to the service catalog and show the field logic actually in service catalog. Under Service Desk, you'll notice a couple things. Custom forms, custom fields, and dynamic form rules is what we're really going to be going over today. Custom forms, and previously where you would set up a form, you'd have all the fields attached to it, and you would scope out where that form would actually show up. Now, forms are actually standalone, and what that means is you can actually now create a form that you can then use multiple times over and over again across different places. You can use it in incidents, assets. There wouldn't be too many places where a form could potentially be used across different modules, but this allows you to create one form with fields and field logic in that form that you can use multiple times in the application. So to create a form, you go under Custom Forms, click the little plus button in the top right-hand corner. You can give it a name. We're going to name this one Incidents because we actually want to create a form that's going to show up on every single incident. And then we'll create another form to use if a priority is critical. So the name is something that only the admins or the service agent users who have access to setup would see. This is all for managing the form. This is not something that the end users or somebody who's submitting the incident would see. Same thing with the description. It just kind of gives a better understanding of what this form is actually used for. Again, just for management purposes. Form fields, what you'll notice, again, that's different. There's no scoping here on the actual form. But once you create the form, you can then come over here and add a field. Once you click on Add Fields, you have an area that you're able to search across all custom fields in the system. You're also able to add a new field. So let's see, we want to do Impact is one that we want to add to every single incident. So we'll click that. And as I add a field, you'll see that a new button pops up that said Add Logic. So that will allow us to add a little bit of logic around when these fields present themselves within the form. We'll get to that in a second. Let's add another one. Let's say amount of users affected. So now we have the two fields that we want to show on every single incident. So now what I want to do is I actually want to create some logic around when I want one of these two fields to actually pop up. So if I go to Add Logic, you'll see this new pop-up happens within the actual page. The form logic looks just like and kind of functions like our process workflow that you see in the service catalog. So it should be pretty easy to pick up and go. The options underneath here are a little bit different. What you'll see first is the condition set. Again, it allows you to say if this field is selected, then present. Then you can create an action off of that. So we'll create a condition that says impact. Again, the name here doesn't display anywhere. It's just for visualization and management of the actual form logic. Field, even though we only have two fields on this form, you actually have an ability to create a condition of any field that's in the system. So you could have it say if the state is in progress, then I want to display this field, or I want to enable this field or disable this field. We'll go over the actions in a second. It is correct for you to see all the fields here because you could potentially want to control fields based on other fields that are in other forms that are already presented on that incident or that module. But what we're going to actually do is we're going to look at impact. Your operator is equals or not equals. And then we want to say if it is high or maybe even medium. Those are the two conditions that we're going to be looking for. You can add other conditions in here. So it would obviously have to meet all the conditions, any of the conditions, or you can actually create a custom operator between the conditions. So it could be if the first condition and 2 and or 3, it actually allows you to create a little bit more customization around condition sets. We're going to say all, we're just going to keep it to this one. So we'll add that condition set. You'll see on true and on false. What we'll do is we'll say on true, we want to create an action. We'll say show field. And under the actions, you have 6 different options. You have show field, hide field, enable, disable, required, not required. By default, all fields are shown on a form. So if you have a customer that wants to hide a field from the very get-go, you would have to add an action at the very top of this form logic that says hide this individual field. And you would have to do that for each field that you want to hide. So if you want to just one field to show up, but then based on the logic, it populates different fields. You would need to tell it that. You can also do it within the on true and on false, and I'll show you that here in a second. So you have the hide field, the show field, enable field, and disable field. A good use case here would be you have a tier 1 and tier 2 team. You have certain fields that show and populate for tier 1. And then let's say it moves over to a tier 2 team. You can then use the action for showing more fields for that tier 2 team. And then you can also use an action to disable the previous fields that the tier 1 team populated. So it would lock those previous fields that were earlier on in the incident lifecycle, but it would then allow the tier 2 team to populate the fields that they have. And then when you potentially could have it to where if tier 2 flips it back over to tier 1, you could disable the fields that tier 2 is in control of and enable the ones for tier 1. So it allows you to actually lock down fields based on whatever condition you have. Unless there is a logic around them, all fields are enabled from default. And then required or not required, this allows you to make a field required at a certain point if, let's say, you select impact, how big it is, and let's say we always have amount of users affected visible, we can then say, okay, we actually want that field to now be required because they select high. We want to make sure that we are actually collecting the amount of users affected. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to say we want to show field. This field selection is obviously going to show you the fields that you have on the form because that's what you're actually controlling. So we'll say amount of users affected. If the condition, again, is looking at high or medium, if it's low, then we'll say add an action. And we'll say hide field. So we will take the hide field option, and then we will say we will want to hide that field. So that's the field logic. There's no need to save anything. You can click the X and the logic is there. You just click view again. When you start putting logic on fields, you'll see that there is a logic tag that hits that field. Within the form, you're able to drag and drop the actual layout of how you want them, if you want them side by side or vertical. And then you still have the options to make a field mandatory, show it in the portal. They still will need to say, hey, I want this field to actually be shown in the portal. And you can also remove this field. So let's go ahead and create this form. Now that I have this form, that form it's awesome. It's a standalone form, but it's not going to do anything until I tell the system, hey, I want to show this form whenever X, Y, and Z happens. And that's where dynamic form rules comes into play. You'll see like instance, Salesforce, applications, Salesforce, and you see the scope, updated at, and you can actually turn these different rules active or inactive. But what I want to do is I actually want to create a new rule. We'll call this all incidents. Now, something that's different about dynamic form rules than what used to be when the scoping was actually on the forms. Previously, if you wanted, let's say, this impact and amount of users affected to show up on every single form, you would have to add that field to every single form to make sure that it was there. Let's say you had a category that had additional fields you want collected, you would have to add those two fields on those forms also. With dynamic form rules, we can say, I want to show this form with this rule, but then there's an additional, let's say there's an additional rule for a certain category, subcategory that's also selected. You can show that additional form on top of this form. So now we can just create one rule that shows one form for all incidents instead of having to continuously add these fields to all the different forms. The name, again, management purposes. Description, same thing. Scope, this is just like where it used to be with the custom forms. You're going to pick the scope in which this dynamic form rule is actually going to be looking for. So you have all the different modules across the whole system. We'll click incidents. The second you click on the scope, you'll see a rule area pop up. Again, this functions just like our process workflow engine, same look and feel. Condition sets. So if I say I want this all incidents and I scope it to incidents, unless I put a rule in here, it's still not going to know when it needs to fire. It doesn't know when it needs to display this form. So I need to come in here and actually say, I want to create an action, show form. Under the actions, you have two actions here. You have show form and hide form. So we're going to show the form, and then you have all the standalone forms that you created. We'll click on the incidents one. So now it knows this dynamic form rules. It's going to say, okay, this is an incident. And I'm going to look at the rules. Okay, this rule has no conditions set on it, so I just need to go ahead and display this form. So every single time I create an incident comes in, it's automatically going to show those two fields. You do obviously have the options here for condition sets. Condition sets work the same way. All the fields across the system are visible for here, so you can say if the priority is critical and the state is in progress, then I need to display this form. It really gives you the power to show and hide forms, and then with the field logic, show and hide the fields based off of any combination of things that you want. So let's create this rule. So now when we go over and we actually create a new incident, we should see, so there's two forms actually that are designed just to shoot off for all incidents. But we'll see that new field that I added for step one, what's the impact radius. If we say hi, we now have that field pop up that says amount of users affected. We should probably make this required, obviously, if we're going to populate it, if we're going to show it. But it shows you that we are able to, let's say we say low, that field will disappear. So again, gives that flexibility to show and hide fields, show and hide different forms based on different selections. It's working obviously right now with the creation of an incident. This would also work on the portal if you had those fields marked to show on the portal. And then it also works after the incident is created and your texts are actually working the incident. If they make any changes that then fire off a new dynamic form rule, then it will obviously fire that off. Let's go back into setup. I'll talk about custom fields and then we'll hop over to service catalog and talk about what changes are happening there. So under custom fields, this is where you're able to manage all the custom fields within the system. Something that's new here is you'll see the scope. There's two scopes now in the system, is service catalog and global. One of the big things that we'll be doing with this release is actually migrating all individual variables into custom fields. So previously, you had to recreate every single variable for every single service catalog item, even if they were exactly the same selections. So what we're doing is when we do the migration, we are going to look at the name of the field and the inputs in that field. And if they are exactly the same across multiple service catalog items, we're going to create it as one custom field and then have those fields obviously presented on the service catalog item. We'll go over this a little bit more when we go into the service catalog. The reason why there's two scopes of service catalog and global is because even though you have, let's say, a drop down that has the same like application you'll see right here, you could potentially have an application field that is going to be different for different service catalog items. So with global fields, you can't have the same name twice for the field. But with the service catalog, you might want an application drop down that shows certain applications, and then let's say for another service catalog item you want another field that's called application but has totally different selections. So you are able to create multiple custom fields with the same name if they're scoped to the service catalog, and those fields are only available in the service catalog. Creating a custom field, same way it was before, clicking the plus button in the top right. You're able to give it a name. This name is actually visible to the end user or the service agent user. This is going to be the name of the actual field. Field types, something you'll notice different here with the custom fields is we now have multi-pick lists. So we had to move over obviously all the variable types into custom fields. This is awesome because it gives you the ability to use that multi-pick list, which is the main thing our customers were asking for outside of the service catalog. Something you'll notice here that a field type that has not been included is dependent dropdowns. Dependent dropdowns are now going to be what we call field logic, which I'll show you once we get into the service catalog. Last thing you'll notice here, when you're actually creating the field in setup, you have the ability to choose what you want for the scope. So global can be used in service catalog. It can be used across the whole application. And then service catalog allows you to, again, create fields that have potentially the same name as another field, but have different inputs. Last thing I want to show you right here before we hop over to the service catalog, this gives you the ability to make a field active or inactive, and you're also able to delete it from here. So let's hop out of setup. Let's hop into the service catalog. In here, let's go ahead and create a new service catalog item. Same way as before, click the plus button at the top right. Everything up here at the top is going to be exactly the same, the title, the description, all these fun things. Where it really starts to get different or is completely different is the inputs area. So when we click on add a field, we now get this pop-up. This pop-up is displaying is default filter to service catalog custom fields. It allows you to search for different custom fields. It allows you to multi-pick custom fields to then add to the service catalog item. But some of the really cool features around this is over on the right-hand side, you'll notice that we have a used in section, kind of what I was talking about when you go to delete the field. We'll be able to implement this a little bit later. But here we're able to say, okay, this field was used in this service catalog item. And this is a text area, but if we were to select a multi-pick list, we also would then see the values in there. So this gives you that better understanding of, let's say you have custom fields with the same exact name. You need to know what values are in each one of them before you say, this is the one I want, let me add it. So we can see the values, and then you can also still see where is this used. If we flip this over from service catalog to either global or all, you can still see where, if it's a service catalog or a global field. But let's say we click on a global field, we'll have the values. You can also then say in used in, it is used in the custom form of that one that we created incidents. If I were to click on this, it would open a new tab. It would take me to setup. Obviously, if a service agent user clicks on that and they do not have permission to go to that area, they would obviously get an error. But admins or anybody who has the permissions to view that area in setup, it would take them directly to that form. And you can see, okay, this is where this field is also being used. This is how you can add different custom fields that are already created. But let's say I want to create a new custom field that isn't available. Well, there's a new little add new button down here. Same way that we were creating those custom fields in the setup, same thing would happen here. So you'd give the field a name. The field types are exactly the same. The difference here is the scoping is automatically locked into service catalog. And the reason why we did this is because it's a roles and permissions thing. Admins, service agent users need to have the ability to create new fields that they can then use to build out service catalog items. But they don't have the ability, or shouldn't have the ability, to create fields that are global. That's something that should be more managed by somebody who has admin rights or access to the actual setup. So this is going to be locked into the scope of service catalog. And that doesn't matter if you're an admin or if you're a service agent user. If you're building a field from the service catalog creation or when you're editing it, it's always going to be service catalog. So let's go ahead and add some fields. Let's just go ahead and pick some random things. Accessories needed, multi-pick list, additional information, amount of users affected, application. So we're going to click add. Again, you can multi-pick list. Same thing that you were able to do before. You're able to move these fields around. You're able to make them mandatory. You're able to edit the actual field, and you're able to remove it. Just like on the custom form, after we add a field or multiple fields, you'll see the add logic button appears. So we'll click on that. Same form logic as we saw on the custom form is going to show up here. So you're able to add condition sets that say, let's see here, application needed. Same thing you'll see here. You'll actually not see all the fields across the whole application. You're only going to see fields that are part of this actual request. So we'll say, let's say application equals Slack. Then on true, you can have an action that would show same actions, show, hide, enable, disable, required, not required. So the same concept is happening here that we saw in the custom form. Some of the big use cases we see here are things like employee onboarding and offboarding. So let's say you have an example. You have customers request, hey, we have full-time, part-time, and seasonal hires, and each one of those have different fields that we need to populate to ask them different things. So you could have a field that is called hire type, and it would have the selection of full-time, part-time, and seasonal. And you can come into this field logic. You would obviously all the other fields that you want to have on that form. And then you can come into the logic and you can say, okay, I want to hide all these fields. And then on a condition of if a full-time is selected, I want to show these 10 fields. You could do that now. And then when that full-time is selected, those 10 fields would show up. You can also then say, but actually I want these 5 fields to be presented, but I want these other 5 fields to be hidden if the person is a part-time. You can do that in form logic now. So it gives you that ability to hide and display fields based on previous selections. And it can go even deeper. So let's say you have a full-time or a part-time hire, and then it gets down to a part where it says, does this person need swag? If the person who's filling out this form says yes, you can then populate another field that says, okay, what is their shirt size, so on and so forth. So as you can see, dynamic forms and the ability to be able to use those custom fields anywhere across the application via service catalog items, via global fields, really gives you that better functionality to be not only just an administrator and be able to manage those fields in a more streamlined way, but be able to set up those dynamic fields and field logic to collect that information right up front to make sure that your users have the correct information from your end users and that everybody can go get work done quicker. And again, some of the use cases that are going to be most beneficial for you and your organization are going to be things like onboarding and offboarding, seasonal hires, new hardware purchases, and submitting POs across different departments of the organization. And we have lots of great resources here at SolarWinds, including our SolarWinds Academy, our sales and our support teams, and of course, our THWAC user community. Thanks again for watching.